Chapter 3: Cells and Tissues. Let's discuss functional compartments of the body. Alright, let's take a look at how the body is organized into different compartments. Think of these as the body's natural sections, each with a specific role. First, we've got the three major cavities. The cranial cavity is up in your skull and houses your brain, keeping it safe and sound. The thoracic cavity is in your chest. It's home to your heart and lungs and is separated from the next cavity by the diaphragm. Then there's the abdominopelvic cavity, kind of a two-for-one deal. The abdominal part has your stomach, liver, and intestines, while the pelvic part takes care of your reproductive organs. Now, there are also fluid-filled compartments, and these are pretty cool. They act like cushions for certain organs. For example, the pleural sacs wrap around your lungs. The pericardial sac cradles your heart, and the peritoneal sac surrounds the organs in your abdomen. These sacs help reduce friction when things move around, like when you breathe or digest food. Let's take a closer look at the body's compartments and how they're organized anatomically. Starting at the top, we have the cranial cavity. This is the space inside your skull where the brain is housed. It's like a protective vault for one of the most important organs in your body. Next, moving down to the thoracic cavity, which is in your chest. It holds the heart and lungs and is separated from the abdomen by the diaphragm, a muscle that plays a huge role in breathing. Within this cavity, you'll find the pleural sacs, which surround each lung, and the pericardial sac, which cradles the heart. Below that is the abdominopelvic cavity, which is further divided into two parts. The abdominal cavity contains organs like the stomach, liver, and intestines, where digestion and other vital processes happen. The pelvic cavity holds the reproductive organs and parts of the urinary system. All these compartments not only provide structure, but also protection and support for your organs, ensuring they function properly within their specific spaces. Let's talk about something fascinating: the lumen of some organs. First off, what is a lumen? It's the interior space of any hollow organ. Think of it as the inside of a tube, like the space where food moves through your digestive system, or air travels in your lungs. These lumens can be partially or completely filled with air or fluid, depending on the organ's function. For instance, the lumen of the respiratory tract is filled with air, while the digestive tract might contain food, fluids, or even gas. Here's something cool to think about: some of these lumens are technically considered extensions of the external environment. So even though they're inside your body, they're not fully inside in the way we think about it. For example, when you eat, the food in your stomach is still technically part of the external environment until it's absorbed into your bloodstream. The same goes for the respiratory tract, where air flows in and out, or the reproductive tract in certain cases. This connection between the external environment and the lumens of our hollow organs is what allows us to interact with the world, breathing, eating, and more. Alright, let's break down the fluids in our body, specifically CF and ICF. First, CF, or extracellular fluid, is the fluid found outside of cells. It's divided into two main categories: plasma and interstitial fluid. Plasma is the fluid part of blood, where nutrients, hormones, and waste products are transported. Interstitial fluid surrounds the cells, acting like a cushion and providing nutrients while helping remove waste. On the other hand, we have ICF, or intracellular fluid. This is the fluid inside the cells. Think of it as the internal environment where most cellular processes happen. It's packed with proteins, ions, and other molecules that are essential for cell function. The key difference between these two is their location and composition. CF and ICF are separated by cell membranes, and the balance between them is critical for processes like hydration, nutrient exchange, and maintaining a stable internal environment. Now let's talk about the two main fluid compartments in the body: extracellular fluid and intracellular fluid, and where they're located. Starting with ECF, this is all the fluid found outside of cells. It's further divided into two components: blood plasma, which is the liquid part of blood, and helps transport nutrients, gases, and waste throughout the body. Interstitial fluid, which surrounds the cells, acting as a buffer and providing the nutrients cells need to survive. On the other hand, ICF is the fluid inside cells, making up the majority of the body's total water content. Each type of cell contains this fluid, which is essential for their specific functions. For instance, fat cells store energy. Red blood cells carry oxygen. Smooth muscle cells help with movement and function of organs like the intestines or blood vessels. These compartments, ECF and ICF, are separated by cell membranes, which regulate what moves in and out. Maintaining the right balance between these two is critical for hydration, nutrient delivery, and overall cellular function. Let's talk about the biological membranes that surround and protect every cell in your body. The cell membrane is an incredible structure that separates the cell from its environment and plays several key roles. It provides physical isolation, keeping the internal environment of the cell separate from the outside. It regulates exchange, letting in nutrients and oxygen while keeping out waste and harmful substances. It acts as a communication hub, allowing the cell to interact with and respond to signals from its environment. And finally, it gives structural support, maintaining the shape of the cell and anchoring it to surrounding tissues. Now, what's the membrane made of? It's mostly lipids, specifically phospholipids, along with proteins. Picture a sea of phospholipids with proteins floating in it. That's the fluid mosaic model. This design makes the membrane flexible while allowing proteins to perform specific functions like transporting molecules or transmitting signals. The cell membrane isn't just a boundary, it's an active and dynamic player in keeping the cell alive and functional. Let's dive into the structure of the cell membrane using the fluid mosaic model, a great way to understand how this membrane functions. Think of the membrane as a dynamic and flexible mosaic of components. The phospholipid bilayer forms the foundation. Each phospholipid has a hydrophilic head that loves water and hydrophobic tails that repel water. This arrangement creates a barrier between the inside and outside of the cell. Cholesterol molecules are embedded in the bilayer. These help maintain the membrane's flexibility, especially when temperatures change. Now, let's talk about the proteins. Peripheral proteins sit on the surface of the membrane and help with communication and attachment. Integral or transmembrane proteins span the entire bilayer, acting as channels or transporters for molecules to move in and out of the cell. Glycoproteins, with carbohydrate chains attached, play a role in cell recognition and signaling. Altogether, this model showcases the membrane's fluidity and versatility. It's not just a passive barrier, it's a bustling hub of activity, coordinating transport, communication, and structural support to keep the cell functioning properly. Let's take a closer look at how membrane lipids play a critical role in forming the hydrophobic barrier of the cell membrane. First up are the phospholipids. These are special molecules with two distinct parts. The phosphate head is hydrophilic, meaning it loves water and is happy to interact with it. The fatty acid tails, on the other hand, are hydrophobic. They repel water and prefer to stick together. When these phospholipids arrange themselves in a bilayer, the hydrophilic heads face outward toward the watery environments inside and outside the cell, while the hydrophobic tails tuck themselves away, creating a barrier. This design is genius. It keeps water and other substances from freely moving across the membrane. Now let's add cholesterol into the mix. Cholesterol molecules insert themselves between the phospholipids. Their job is to maintain the membrane's fluidity, making sure it doesn't become too rigid or too loose, especially as temperatures change. This lipid-based barrier isn't just about structure, it's about control. By being selective about what enters or leaves the cell, the membrane lipids ensure that the internal environment remains stable. Okay, now let's focus on the proteins in the cell membrane and how they contribute to its function. First, we have the integral proteins. These are like the permanent fixtures of the membrane. They're embedded deep into the membrane and can't be removed without disrupting the structure. The most common type of integral protein is the transmembrane protein. These proteins span the entire phospholipid bilayer, connecting the intracellular and extracellular environments. What makes these transmembrane proteins so special? They play critical roles. They act as channels or transporters, allowing specific molecules like ions or nutrients to pass in and out of the cell. They serve as receptors, picking up signals from outside the cell and helping the cell respond appropriately. These proteins are vital for communication and exchange between the cell and its environment. Imagine them as the gatekeepers or messengers, ensuring that only the right substances get through and that the cell responds to external cues in the right way. Let's break down the cell membrane into its main components using this concept map. At the center, we have the cell membrane, a dynamic structure that consists of several key players. Cholesterol, which works alongside phospholipids and sphingolipids to form the lipid bilayer. This combination creates a barrier that separates the inside of the cell from the external environment, maintaining a selective boundary. Carbohydrates, which pair with proteins or lipids to form glycolipids and glycoproteins. These structures are essential for cell recognition, structural stability, and immune responses. Finally, proteins, which play roles as receptors, channels, or enzymes, enabling communication and transport between the cell and its surroundings. The beauty of this concept map is how it illustrates the interconnectedness of these components. Together, they don't just form a membrane, they create a functional interface between the cell and its environment. So the next time you think about the cell membrane, remember it's not just a simple barrier, it's a sophisticated system working to maintain stability and enable communication. Now, let's talk about the Glycocalyx, an essential structure on the external surface of the cell membrane. Picture this. The Glycocalyx is like a protective coat that surrounds the outside of the cell. It provides a shield against mechanical stress and pathogens, while also playing a critical role in cell-to-cell communication. But what forms this protective layer? Two key components. Glycolipids, which are carbohydrates attached to lipids. Glycoproteins, where carbohydrates are linked to proteins. Together, these structures not only enhance the cell's defense, but also help in identifying the cell to its neighbors. For example, the Glycocalyx is crucial in immune system functions. It helps immune cells recognize whether a cell belongs to the body or if it's an invader. Think of the Glycocalyx as the name tag for cells, ensuring proper interactions and providing protection in the cellular environment. First, let's talk about differentiation, a fascinating process where specific genes in a cell become active, leading to the development of specialized cells. Think of it as the cell's way of becoming an expert in a specific job, like a muscle cell contracting or a nerve cell transmitting signals. Now, cells are organized into compartments, each with specific roles to ensure the cell functions properly. Cytoplasm is the space inside the cell membrane, but outside the nucleus. It's divided into 4 parts. Cytosol is fluid where everything floats. Inclusions are little storage units for nutrients like glycogen or fat, or even cellular debris. Cytoskeleton is a network of protein fibers that gives the cell its shape and helps it move and transport materials. Organelles are the cell's machinery structures, like the mitochondria, which generate energy, or the endoplasmic reticulum, which processes proteins and lipids. Nucleus is the control center of the cell. This is where genetic material is stored, and it orchestrates everything from growth to reproduction. By dividing into these compartments, the cell ensures efficiency and organization, much like departments in a factory. Each plays a vital role, working together to keep the cell, and by extension, the entire organism alive and functional. At the center of it all is the nucleus. This is the cell's command center, housing DNA and directing all activities. Surrounding the nucleus is the cytoplasm, which is where most cellular activities happen. The cytoplasm has several distinct parts. Cytosol. This is the fluid that fills the cell, a bit like the soup in which all the other components float. Membranous organelles are specialized structures with specific functions. Mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, generate energy. Endoplasmic reticulum processes and transports proteins and lipids. The Golgi apparatus packages and ships molecules. Lysosomes and peroxisomes handle waste and detoxification. Inclusions. Think of these as the storage units holding lipid droplets for energy, glycogen granules for fuel, and ribosomes, which are protein factories. Protein fibers. These include the cytoskeleton, which gives the cell its shape and structure. Centrioles, which play a role in cell division. Cilia and flagella, which are involved in movement. Finally, surrounding it all is the cell membrane, which acts as a protective barrier and regulates what comes in and out. By compartmentalizing these structures, the cell stays organized and efficient. Every part plays a vital role in keeping the cell alive and functional. First, what sets inclusions apart is that they lack membranes, meaning they're in direct contact with the surrounding cytosol. Some inclusions are like the cell's pantry. They store nutrients. Glycogen granules hold reserve energy, perfect for when the cell needs a quick boost. Lipid droplets store fats, a more long-term energy source. But inclusions don't just store nutrients. They also have an essential role in protein production through ribosomes. Here's the cool part about ribosomes. They're made from ribosomal RNA and proteins, kind of like tiny factories. Their job: to manufacture proteins, which are the building blocks of life. Ribosomes can either be fixed, attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, or free, floating in the cytosol. Both types are equally hardworking. So inclusions may be small, but they're mighty when it comes to storing energy and producing proteins that keep the cell running smoothly. Let's talk about the cytoskeleton, the cell's internal framework, and its three key players: protein fibers. First, we have the microfilaments, made of actin fibers. These are the smallest protein fibers, providing support and helping the cell maintain its shape. Think of them as the cell's scaffolding. Next up are the intermediate filaments, which are a bit thicker. Examples include keratin, which you'll find in your skin, and neurofilaments, essential for nerve cells. These filaments give extra strength, helping cells resist mechanical stress like a protective shield. And finally, we've got the microtubules, the largest of the three. These are made of tubulin and act like highways inside the cell, allowing organelles and vesicles to move with the help of motor proteins. Together, these fibers give the cell structural support and allow movement, both internally and externally. And here's the exciting part: these fibers work closely with motor proteins, specialized enzymes that help the cell move things around. Let's take a closer look at the protein fibers that make up the cytoskeleton. These fibers come in three sizes, and each has unique roles in the cell. First, we have the microfilaments, which are the thinnest at only 7 nanometers in diameter. They're made of actin, a globular protein, and they work closely with myosin to help muscles contract. Picture them as the cables pulling the levers in muscle cells. Next, we have the intermediate filaments, which are a bit thicker at 10 nanometers. These include keratin and neurofilament proteins, giving structural strength to the cytoskeleton, as well as forming the protective barriers in your skin, hair, and nails. Think of them as the tough beams holding a building together. Finally, the largest fibers are the microtubules, at 25 nanometers in diameter. Made of tubulin, these fibers are the cell's transport highways, enabling the movement of cilia, flagella, and even chromosomes during cell division. They also help transport organelles around the cell, like a well-organized delivery system. So, whether it's muscle contraction, protecting your skin, or moving essential cargo inside the cell, these protein fibers are vital to keeping everything running smoothly. Let's explore the cytoskeleton, a dynamic framework inside the cell that not only supports its shape, but also powers movement and organization. Here, you can see the microvilli on the cell surface. They're supported by microfilaments and are essential for increasing the surface area, which is particularly useful in cells involved in absorption, like those in your intestines. Just inside the cell membrane, a network of microfilaments forms. These thin fibers, made of actin, are like the scaffolding of the cell, giving it structure and helping it change shape when needed. Moving deeper into the cell, we encounter intermediate filaments. These are like strong, flexible cables made of proteins such as keratin and myosin, which provide resilience and mechanical strength. And finally, we have the microtubules, the largest of the cytoskeleton fibers. These are not only responsible for maintaining the cell's shape, but also serve as tracks for intracellular transport and are crucial during cell division. Let's dive into the fascinating world of microtubules and the incredible structures they form inside our cells. First, meet the centrosome, the mastermind behind microtubule assembly. Positioned near the nucleus, it's where tubulin monomers come together to build microtubules, which act like highways and structural beams inside the cell. From here, microtubules organize into centrioles, which are vital during cell division. Think of centrioles as the directors of traffic. They guide the movement of DNA, ensuring it's divided correctly between daughter cells. But microtubules aren't just about cell division. They also extend outwards to form cilia and flagella, which are like the cell's external appendages. Cilia act like oars, creating fluid movement across the surface of cells. Imagine cilia lining your respiratory tract, sweeping away mucus and debris to keep your airways clear. And then we have flagella, which are responsible for propelling cells like sperm through fluid. With their whip-like motion, they provide the mobility needed for fertilization, a critical function for life. Let's talk about two incredible cellular structures, cilia and flagella, the movers and shakers of the cell world. Take a look at the surface of the respiratory epithelium in the first image. Those hair-like projections you see are cilia in action, constantly working to sweep away mucus and debris. This helps keep our airways clear and functioning, essential for breathing. Now, let's zoom in on their structure. Both cilia and flagella have a unique internal design called the 9+2 arrangement. Picture 9 pairs of microtubules surrounding a central pair, all working together to create movement. This intricate design is powered by motor proteins that slide the microtubules past each other, generating motion. But how do they move differently? Cilia work in coordinated waves, like a rowing team, creating fluid movement across a cell's surface. Meanwhile, flagella, like the one found on sperm cells, use a whip-like motion to propel the cell forward. Together, these structures demonstrate how microscopic components play enormous roles in our bodies. Whether it's clearing airways or enabling reproduction, cilia and flagella are essential players in maintaining our health. Let's dive into the cytoskeleton, the dynamic scaffold that provides structure and mobility to our cells. Think of it as a highly adaptable framework, always adjusting to the cell's needs. First, the cytoskeleton is responsible for maintaining cell shape. It gives every cell its distinct structure, whether it's the flattened shape of skin cells or the elongated form of nerve cells. But it doesn't stop there. The cytoskeleton also plays a vital role in internal organization. It acts as a highway system, ensuring that organelles like the Golgi apparatus and mitochondria stay in their designated spots, keeping the cell running smoothly. Speaking of highways, the cytoskeleton is essential for intracellular transport. It provides pathways for motor proteins to carry cargo, such as vesicles and molecules, across the cell. Without it, intracellular communication and delivery would grind to a halt. And finally, the cytoskeleton is the engine behind movement, whether it's a crawling immune cell chasing down bacteria or the contraction of muscle fibers. So, the cytoskeleton isn't just a scaffold, it's an organizer, a transporter, and a mover, constantly reshaping itself to meet the ever-changing demands of the cell. Now, let's explore the fascinating world of motor proteins, the cellular workhorses responsible for moving organelles, vesicles, and other cellular components. In this image, we see a motor protein, depicted like a tiny molecular robot. walking along a cytoskeletal fiber, almost like a person walking on a tightrope. The round structure at the top represents an organelle, which the motor protein is carrying. Here's how it works. Motor proteins use the cytoskeleton as a track. Powered by ATP, they convert chemical energy into mechanical work. With each ATP molecule they use, they take a step, moving their cargo, whether it's an organelle, a vesicle, or other critical components, to where it's needed in the cell. The direction of movement depends on the type of cytoskeletal fiber and motor protein involved. This movement is critical for processes like intracellular transport, cell division, and even responses to external signals. Without motor proteins, cells would lose their ability to organize and function efficiently. All right, let's dive into the specialized compartments inside a cell organelles. Think of these as the various departments in a factory, each with its own unique role to ensure the cell runs smoothly. First up is the mitochondria, often referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. These organelles are double-membraned with an inner space called the mitochondrial matrix. They house mitochondrial DNA and play a crucial role in producing cellular ATP, the energy currency of the cell. Next, we have the endoplasmic reticulum, or This comes in two types. The rough is studded with ribosomes and specializes in synthesizing proteins. The smooth is ribosome-free and focuses on making fatty acids, steroids, and lipids. Then, there's the Golgi apparatus, which acts like the cell's post office. It sorts, modifies, and packages proteins into vesicles to be sent to their destinations. Speaking of vesicles, these are small membrane-bound containers. They come in two main varieties. Storage vesicles, like lysosomes, which break down bacteria and old cell parts. Secretory vesicles, like peroxisomes, which break down fatty acids and detoxify harmful materials. Together, these organelles create distinct compartments, allowing the cell to perform complex functions with remarkable efficiency. Let's take a closer look at three key organelles illustrated in this figure: mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus, and the endoplasmic reticulum. Starting with the mitochondria, these are fascinating double-membrane structures. The outer membrane encases the organelle, while the inner membrane folds into structures called cristae. These cristae increase surface area, optimizing ATP production, the cell's energy currency. The matrix within is where many critical metabolic reactions occur. Next, we have the Golgi apparatus, which you can think of as the cell's packaging and shipping department. It consists of stacked sacs, known as cisternae, that modify and package proteins and lipids. These products are then sorted into vesicles for transport to their destinations inside or outside the cell. Lastly, the endoplasmic reticulum comes in two varieties. The rough is studded with ribosomes and specializes in synthesizing proteins. The smooth lacks ribosomes and focuses on lipid synthesis and calcium storage. Together, these organelles form a highly coordinated system that keeps the cell functioning efficiently. Each plays a specialized role, yet they all depend on one another to maintain cellular life. All right, let's dive into three important organelles shown here: peroxisomes, lysosomes, and centrioles, each with unique functions in the cell. First, let's talk about peroxisomes. These small, membrane-bound structures contain enzymes that break down fatty acids and neutralize foreign materials like toxins. Think of them as the cell's detox centers, working to maintain cellular health by neutralizing harmful substances. Next are the lysosomes, which are small vesicles packed with powerful digestive enzymes. These are the cell's recycling centers. They break down cellular debris, damaged organelles, and even pathogens. Without lysosomes, waste would accumulate in the cell, leading to dysfunction. Finally, we have the centrioles, which are structures made of microtubules. They play a vital role in cell division by directing the movement of DNA during mitosis and meiosis. You can think of centrioles as the organizers of the cell's division process. Together, these organelles are crucial for keeping the cell clean, functional, and ready to divide when needed. Each of them contributes to the highly efficient system that keeps our cells and us alive. Now let's talk about the nucleus, often called the control center of the cell. Why is it called that? Well, this is where the cell's genetic information is housed and managed. The nucleus is enclosed by the nuclear envelope, which is made up of two membranes. But it's not completely sealed off. It has nuclear pore complexes, which act like tiny gates that allow certain molecules to pass in and out. These pores are crucial for communication between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Inside the nucleus, we find chromatin, which is essentially DNA wrapped around proteins. Think of it as an organized storage system for genetic instructions. When the cell needs to grow, divide, or make proteins, the DNA in chromatin provides the blueprints. And finally, we have the nucleolus, a structure within the nucleus. It's like a factory dedicated to ribosome production, containing the genes and proteins needed to assemble ribosomes. Ribosomes, in turn, are essential for protein synthesis. Here's a closer look at the nucleus, our cell's command center. Notice how it's surrounded by a double membrane structure called the nuclear envelope. This double layer design isn't just for protection, it also helps regulate what enters and exits the nucleus. You'll see these nuclear pores piercing through the envelope. Think of them as the cell's border checkpoints, managing the exchange of materials like RNA and proteins between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. They're essential for keeping communication lines open between the nucleus and the rest of the cell. Inside the nucleus, there's a mix of DNA and proteins that form chromatin. When the cell is resting, not dividing, this chromatin looks like a messy tangle. But don't be fooled, it's highly functional, holding all the instructions needed for the cell to operate. Finally, we have the nucleoli. These are those dark staining bodies you see in the image, and they're like mini factories for ribosome production. Ribosomes, as we know, are the powerhouses for building proteins. So in summary, the nucleus isn't just a storage room for DNA, it's a dynamic center for communication and coordination, making sure the cell runs smoothly. Let's talk about tissues. When we're studying tissues, we dive into a branch of biology called histology, which is essentially the study of tissue structure and function. It's like being a detective for the body's building blocks. So, what are tissues? They're groups of cells that share similar structures and work together to perform specific functions. For example, muscle tissue helps with movement, while epithelial tissue covers and protects surfaces. But here's the cool part. Cells in a tissue aren't just floating around. They're held together by cell junctions, which act like little bridges or connections between cells. These junctions ensure the tissue stays intact and functions as a unit. We'll dive deeper into those cell junctions in just a bit. Stay tuned for the upcoming slides. Okay, let's zoom in on how cells stick together to form tissues. It's all about cell junctions. Think of cell junctions as the glue or connectors that ensure cells in a tissue stay attached and can function as a team. One of the key players here is something called cell adhesion molecules, or CAMs for short. These are transmembrane proteins, basically proteins that span across the cell membrane. They act as bridges, helping cells bind to one another. It's incredible how these tiny structures allow tissues to maintain their shape and integrity, especially in high-stress areas like your skin or the lining of your intestines. On the next slide, we'll get into the specifics of the different types of cell junctions. Stay with me, it's going to get even more interesting. All right, let's talk about cell junctions. These are like the bridges or connections that hold cells together and allow them to communicate. There are three main types, and each one has a special job. First up, we have communicating junctions, also known as gap junctions. Think of these like tunnels between neighboring cells. They allow direct cell-to-cell communication by letting small molecules and ions pass through. It's like cells are whispering secrets to each other. Next, we've got occluding junctions, also called tight junctions. These act like zippers, sealing the space between cells. Their job is to block the movement of materials between cells, creating a barrier. For example, In your intestines, these junctions prevent harmful substances from sneaking into your bloodstream. Finally, there are anchoring junctions. These are like strong bolts that anchor cells to each other and to the extracellular matrix, the surrounding structure. They provide mechanical stability, especially in tissues that experience a lot of stress, like your skin. A subtype of these is the desmosome, which is a cell-to-cell anchoring junction. Each of these junctions is built with specific proteins like connexins, claudins, and cadherins, which make them perfectly suited for their tasks. Let's dive into the 4 basic tissue types that make up our bodies. Each one has its own unique role, kind of like a team working together to keep us functioning. First, we have epithelial tissue. This is like the body's protective barrier. It lines and covers surfaces, such as your skin, and the lining of your digestive tract. It also plays a key role in absorption, secretion, and sensation. Think of it as the gatekeeper between the inside and outside of your body. Next, there's connective tissue. This is your support system. It provides structure and holds things together. Bones, cartilage, tendons, and even blood are all forms of connective tissue. It's like the scaffolding that keeps everything in place. Then, we've got muscle tissue. This one's all about movement, whether it's your heart pumping, your arms lifting, or even tiny movements inside your stomach. Muscle tissue is divided into 3 types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, and each one is specialized for a specific function. Finally, we have neural or nerve tissue. This is the body's communication network, made up of neurons and glial cells. It processes information, sends signals, and controls responses. Basically, it's your body's command center, helping you think, react, and feel. Together, these tissues create the building blocks for all of the organs and systems in your body. Let's take a closer look at epithelial tissues, or epithelia, and why they're so important. Think of epithelia as the body's protective shields and regulatory gates. There are 2 main types of epithelia: covering and lining epithelia, which form the surfaces of organs, like the skin or the lining of your respiratory tract, and glandular epithelia, which specialize in secretion, like sweat glands or glands that release hormones. Now, let's talk about their structure. It's quite fascinating. Epithelia can be just one layer of cells that is called simple, or multiple layers cells called stratified, depending on their role. For instance, your skin has many layers for protection, while the lining of your lungs is thin to allow for gas exchange. These tissues sit on a basal lamina, also known as the basement membrane. Think of this as the foundation that anchors the epithelial cells and separates them from the underlying tissues. Epithelia can also be classified as tight or leaky. Tight epithelia form strong barriers, like the lining of your stomach, to prevent acid leakage. On the other hand, leaky epithelia, like those in capillaries, allow substances to pass through more easily, facilitating exchange. Let's explore the types of epithelia and how they're classified. Think of this as getting to know the different personalities of epithelial tissues. First up, we have the structural classification. Sheets of tissue are like the protective coverings of your body, such as your skin or the linings of hollow organs and tubes, like your intestines or blood vessels. Secretory epithelia are your body's factories. They specialize in synthesizing and releasing substances, like sweat, hormones, or enzymes. These are also called glandular epithelia. Now, let's dive into the histological classification, which is based on the number of layers and the shape of the cells. By layers, we have simple epithelia, or one layer of cells, like in the lungs for gas exchange, and stratified epithelia, or multiple layers, like your skin, for protection. By shapes, the cells can be squamous, flat and thin, perfect for quick diffusion; cuboidal, box-shaped, often involved in secretion or absorption; columnar, tall and column-like, great for absorbing nutrients or producing mucus. Each type is beautifully tailored for its specific role in the body. Let's take a closer look at this beautiful cross-section of epithelial tissue under the microscope. Can you see how neatly the cells are arranged in a layer? These are epithelial cells, and they perform various protective and exchange roles in the body. Here's something fascinating. The epithelial cells don't just float around, they're anchored to a layer called the basal lamina, or basement membrane. Think of it as a foundation that provides structural support and connects the epithelium to the underlying tissue. This basal lamina is not made of cells, but of a matrix secreted by the epithelial cells themselves. It's like they're building their own scaffolding. Notice those cell adhesion molecules helping the epithelial cells stick to this basal lamina? Without them, these cells wouldn't stay in place. Finally, beneath the basement membrane is the underlying tissue, which supplies nutrients and removes waste for these cells, since epithelia often lack their own blood supply. All right, let's talk about the different types of epithelial tissues and how they're specialized for various jobs. Imagine these as different roles in a factory. Each type is uniquely built for its function. First, we have exchange epithelia. These are like open windows found in places like the lungs and blood vessels, where they allow gases or small molecules to pass freely. They're only one layer thick and made of flattened cells to make this exchange quick and efficient. Next, we have transporting epithelia, the gatekeepers of your body. Found in the intestines and kidneys, they tightly control what gets in and out. They even have these cool finger-like structures called microvilli to increase surface area for absorption. Then, there's ciliated epithelia. These are like little conveyor belts, with cilia that move fluid or particles across their surface. You'll find them in places like your respiratory tract or reproductive system. Protective epithelia act as your body's armor. They're multiple layers thick, tightly connected, and found in areas like your skin or mouth, where wear and tear are common. Finally, we have secretory epithelia, your body's little factories. They're responsible for producing and releasing substances like enzymes or hormones. Think of glands like the pancreas or thyroid as examples. What's incredible is how these different types are structurally adapted for their specific roles. Let's dive into exchange epithelium. It's like the ultra-efficient delivery system in our body. These tissues are made of very thin, flattened cells, and their main job is to facilitate gas exchange. Think about how quickly oxygen and carbon dioxide need to move in and out of the lungs or blood vessels. These cells make that possible. You'll find exchange epithelium lining the lungs and blood vessels, where speed and efficiency are crucial. They're also called simple squamous epithelium because they're just a single layer of flat cells. In the heart and blood vessels, we have a special name for them: endothelium. This layer plays a critical role in ensuring smooth blood flow and efficient exchange of gases. Now here's a closer look at exchange epithelium in action. This diagram shows how these thin, flat cells allow movement of substances through and between the cells, just perfect for rapid exchange. Notice how this type of epithelium lines capillaries, forming a direct interface with the extracellular fluid and blood. It's like a two-way street. Gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide move efficiently in and out, thanks to the pores and the thin structure of these cells. This setup is key for processes like gas exchange in the lungs and nutrient delivery in tissues. Now, let's talk about transporting epithelium, the type of epithelial tissue specialized for moving substances between the internal and external environments. These cells have a distinct cuboidal or columnar shape, giving them the structure needed to handle transport. One unique feature of transporting epithelium is its membrane modifications. The apical membrane is the side facing the lumen, or the hollow part of an organ or tube. On the other hand, the basolateral membrane faces the extracellular matrix, where interactions with other cells and structures occur. This polarity of membranes allows these cells to direct movement efficiently, ensuring substances are transported to where they're needed. Let's dive into transporting epithelium in more detail with this diagram. As you can see, Transporting epithelial cells are specialized to selectively move substances between the lumen, or the hollow space of an organ like the intestine or kidney, and the extracellular fluid. The apical membrane, which faces the lumen, has microvilli, tiny projections that increase the surface area to maximize absorption or secretion. The basolateral membrane interfaces with the extracellular fluid, facilitating transport into or out of the tissue. Importantly, these cells are tightly connected by tight junctions. These junctions prevent substances from slipping between cells, forcing them to pass through the epithelial cell. As they cross, substances must traverse two phospholipid bilayers, a selective and energy-efficient process. This illustration gives us a closer look at ciliated epithelium, a specialized type of epithelial tissue. The key feature here is the cilia, those hair-like structures on the surface. These cilia beat in a coordinated rhythm, creating fluid currents that help move substances along the epithelial surface. For instance, in the airways, this movement clears mucus and trapped particles, keeping the respiratory system clean. Notice how the tissue includes critical structures like the Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, and nucleus, all of which support the cell's function. The basal lamina at the bottom anchors the cells, giving them structural support. Ciliated epithelium is a perfect example of how structure complements function. Its organization and cellular machinery enable efficient transport and protection in vital areas like the respiratory tract. Here, we see protective epithelium, which serves as the body's shield. This tissue is made up of many layers of stacked cells designed to handle constant wear and tear. For example, in the skin, these layers provide a strong barrier to protect underlying tissues from mechanical, chemical, and microbial damage. What's fascinating is how this epithelium is in a constant state of renewal. As surface cells are sloughed off, new cells migrate upward from the base to maintain the protective barrier. This structure is a perfect example of form-meeting function, a thick layers to protect against external stress while allowing regeneration to maintain integrity over time. It's no surprise we find protective epithelium in areas like the skin, where durability is essential. Now, let's dive into secretory epithelium, which specializes in producing and secreting substances. This type of epithelium can exist as individual cells, like goblet cells, or as part of larger structures, such as glands. There are two main types of glands to know about. Exocrine glands release their products to the external environment through ducts. These products can be serous secretions, which are watery and enzyme-rich, or mucus secretions, like mucus produced by goblet cells that help with lubrication and protection. Endocrine glands, on the other hand, don't use ducts. Instead, they secrete hormones directly into the extracellular compartments, from where they enter the bloodstream and travel to target organs. The distinction between exocrine and endocrine glands is crucial for understanding how different parts of the body communicate and maintain balance. This slide focuses on secretory epithelium, and the figure provides an excellent visual to understand how these cells function. The image highlights goblet cells, a type of exocrine cell that secretes mucus into the lumen of hollow organs like the intestine. Notice the Golgi apparatus, which is key for packaging the mucus, and the nucleus at the base of the cell. The transmission electron micrograph on the right offers a detailed view of the mucus being secreted. What's unique about secretory epithelium is its ability to produce and release products either externally, like mucus in the digestive tract, or internally, such as hormones from endocrine glands that go directly into the bloodstream. This structure-function relationship is critical for maintaining bodily functions like lubrication, protection, and communication between organs. This table is an excellent summary of the four main tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissues. Let's break this down briefly. Epithelial tissue. Minimal matrix with a basal lamina supporting the cells. Found covering body surfaces or lining organs, like the skin or intestines. These cells are tightly packed and come in various shapes and arrangements, from flat to columnar. Connective tissue. It's all about support, with an extensive extracellular matrix filled with fibers and ground substance. Found in areas like cartilage, bone, and blood. Provides structural and nutritional support, but cartilage notably has no blood supply. Muscle tissue. Minimal matrix, but highly specialized for force generation and movement. Found in skeletal muscles, the heart, and smooth muscles lining hollow organs. Muscle cells can be arranged in sheets or bundled fibers, often showing branching. Nerve tissue. Also has minimal matrix, and it specializes in electrical signaling. Found primarily in the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. Nerve cells are highly elongated to facilitate communication. Each tissue type has unique features tailored to its role in the body, from protection and support to communication and movement. This chart provides an excellent comparison to visualize how they function collectively within the body. This slide highlights the structure of connective tissues, which is highly adaptable and varies significantly depending on its function in the body. Let's go through the key points together. Matrix is the defining feature of connective tissue and includes fibers, including collagen, elastin, fibrillin, and fibronectin. Ground substance are a mix of polysaccharides, glycoproteins, and sometimes additional components like calcium, especially in bone. Also, we have cells in the extracellular matrix. Fixed cells are resident cells responsible for maintenance, repair, and storage. Examples include fibroblasts, forming fibers, blasts, builders, clasts, breakers, and sites, maintenance. Mobile cells, like immune cells, are involved in defense and response to injury. Matrix fibers has various types, serves a different function. Collagen provides tensile strength. Elastin adds flexibility. Fibrillin often works alongside elastin. Fibronectin involved in adhesion and anchoring within tissues. This combination of a robust CM and specialized cells allows connective tissue to serve multiple roles, from providing structural support to aiding in healing and defense. This figure provides an organized overview of the components of connective tissue, breaking it down into two main categories: cells and the matrix. For the cells, there are two groups: fixed and mobile. Fixed cells remain stationary and include fibroblasts, adipocytes, and mesenchymal cells. Fibroblasts produce fibers and ground substances. Adipocytes store energy in the form of fat. Mesenchymal cells, stem cells that differentiate into other connective tissue cells. As for mobile cells, these are often involved in defense and repair and include macrophages, mast cells, and other white blood cells. Macrophages engage in immune defense by engulfing pathogens and debris. Mast cells involved in inflammation and allergic reactions. White blood cells assist in immune responses. For the matrix, it primarily responsible structural component and has two primary parts: ground substance and protein fibers. Ground substance can be described as viscous, soft for loose connective tissue, or hard for bone. It includes substances like proteoglycans and glycoproteins that provide a medium for the exchange of nutrients and waste. There are three types of protein fibers, including collagen, elastin, fibrillin, and fibronectin. Collagen provides strength. Elastin adds flexibility. Fibrillin works with elastin for resilience. Fibronectin, important in anchoring cells. This structure allows connective tissues to fulfill various roles, such as providing structural integrity, energy storage, and aiding in the immune response. Let's talk about the different types of connective tissues and what makes them unique. These tissues are like the body's building blocks, each with its own special job. Here's a quick breakdown. For loose connective tissue, picture this as the cushiony layer that fills spaces in your body. It has a gel-like substance with more ground substance than fibers. You'll find collagen, elastic, and reticular fibers here. The main cells are fibroblasts, and it's found around blood vessels, organs, and just beneath the skin. The dense, irregular connective tissue is tougher and has a lot of fibers, mostly collagen, that's arranged in random patterns. Fibroblasts are the key players here. It's great for strength and flexibility, which is why you'll find it in muscle and nerve sheaths. Dense, regular connective tissue is the body's ropes and cables, tendons, and ligaments. The collagen fibers here are perfectly aligned in parallel, making it super strong for pulling forces. Fibroblasts are still the main cells. Adipose tissue is your body's storage solution fat. There's very little ground substance and no fibers. Instead, it's packed with fat cells, which are either brown or white, depending on their function. It's found all over, but its location depends on your age and sex. Blood. Yes, the blood is a connective tissue. Instead of fibers, it's a fluid called plasma. The main cells are blood cells, and it travels through blood and lymph vessels, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and waste. Cartilage is flexible but firm, thanks to its special ground substance and collagen fibers. Chondroblasts are the cells here, and you'll find cartilage in places like your joints, spine, ears, and even your larynx. Lastly, the bone is the body's framework. Bone is rigid because of calcium salts, but it still has collagen for some flexibility. Osteoblasts and osteocytes do the heavy lifting here, maintaining the structure of your skeleton. Each type of connective tissue has a role to play, whether it's support, protection, energy storage, or transportation. They're like a well-coordinated team, keeping your body functioning smoothly. Let's dive into how connective tissues support and protect the body. These tissues are like your body's built-in scaffolding and barriers. We can break them into two main categories: loose connective tissues and dense connective tissues. Loose connective tissues are the flexible and cushioning types. They're found under the skin and help support small glands. Think of a relar tissue, which acts like packing material, and adipose tissue, aka fat, which comes in two flavors: white for energy storage and brown for heat generation. Then there's reticular tissue, which forms a supportive network for organs. For dense connective tissues, we're talking about strength and durability. These can be irregular, like in your skin and protective sheaths, or regular, like in tendons and ligaments. Tendons connect skeletal muscles to bones, making movement possible, while ligaments tie bones to other bones, providing stability. So basically, connective tissues are like the body's custom-built framework: flexible, supportive, and super strong where needed. Let's continue exploring how connective tissues provide structure and function in the body. We have supporting connective tissues, which are a little more specialized: cartilage and bone. For cartilage, think of your nose, ears, knees, and the windpipe. It's a firm but flexible tissue that gives shape and support. However, one key thing about cartilage: it lacks its own blood supply, which is why injuries here take longer to heal. Bone is the tough stuff. Bone is calcified, making it rigid and perfect for supporting our bodies and protecting vital organs. And lastly, we've got liquid connective tissues like blood and lymph. These flow through the body, transporting nutrients, oxygen, and immune cells, keeping us healthy and functioning. So, connective tissues are incredibly versatile. They can hold us together, help us move, and even keep us alive. Dense connective tissue is a powerhouse when it comes to providing strength and flexibility. Take a look at this image. It highlights dense, regular connective tissue. Here, the collagen fibers are neatly packed in parallel bundles. This arrangement makes them incredibly strong and perfect for tasks like connecting muscles to bones or linking bones together. So, think of dense connective tissue as the body's reinforcement cables: strong, durable, and essential for movement and stability. Let's talk about muscle and neural tissues, the excitable tissues that keep our bodies moving and communicating. Muscle tissue is all about contraction, which means it generates force and allows movement. There are three main types: cardiac muscle, which makes your heart beat; Smooth muscle, which is found in places like your digestive tract. Skeletal muscle, which helps move your bones. Now for neural tissue, the communication hub of the body. Neurons, or nerve cells, send signals. These are excitable, meaning they respond to stimuli. Supporting them are glial cells, or neuroglia, which act like the backstage crew keeping everything running smoothly. So, between muscle and neural tissues, we've got the mechanics and messaging systems that power our daily lives. All right, let's wrap it all up with organs. What exactly is an organ? It's simply a group of tissues working together for a specific function. Think of it like a team, where each tissue has its role, but together they achieve a common goal. For example, let's take the skin. It's not just a protective barrier, it's an organ. It's made up of various tissues like epithelial tissue, connective tissue, and nervous tissue. Together, these layers help protect us, regulate temperature, and even sense the world around us. So, organs are like functional units made of tissues, and the skin is one of the coolest examples. Let's bring it all together with a quick summary. We looked at how the body is organized into spaces like the cranial, thoracic, and abdominopelvic cavities. These are the protective and functional barriers of cells, primarily made of lipids and proteins. Inside cells, we explored the cytoplasm, organelles, and their specialized functions. From epithelial to connective, muscle, and nerve tissues, each plays a role in maintaining structure and function. Groups of tissues come together to form organs, like the skin, which is a prime example of teamwork in action. This is how everything in our bodies works together in a perfectly coordinated way to keep us alive and thriving.